The war effort itself saw a true cross section of American society. So, while there was still segregation in the United States at this time, you did see all races and ethnicities play a big part in serving an effort towards the American cause in our war on both fronts. Um, and to think about the American serviceman himself. At that time, many of whom endured brutal outdoor conditions, especially in the South Pacific where it's very hot, humid, and steamy every day, or maybe brutal cold in the forests of Northern Europe in the wintertime. Brutally cold. You had to endure treacherous fighting conditions. All you had to eat were bad rations. We know back then they were called sea rations. Um, Horrible living conditions. You were separated from your families for months upon months, if not several years at a time. And the combat was brutal. Staggering numbers of death and other casualties were immense. Not only did you face all these things, but many times the people that you trained alongside, your best friends, would become brutally and ghastly wounded. And you had to endure that. And there were also racial and ethnic strife to go along with that. There were African American units who did serve and were allowed to serve in completely African American units, but they did serve nonetheless. Most specifically, um, out of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, the Tuskegee Airmen was a squadron of black pilots who fought valiantly in World War II. Another group that also really wonderfully served the American cause were Native Americans, of all people. This is a designated group of people who, for several centuries, had been systematically moved across the United States and had their tribal lands removed and preyed upon by white settlement. You would figure that Native Americans would be rather resentful of the country in which they are now a part because of those historic situations. Not so. Many Native Americans, up to about 25,000 people of Native American descent, valiantly served the United States of America in our effort during World War II. A large part of them operated on the Windtalker program. So, as you had various different communications by radio and otherwise that can now come into play, you might have enemy intelligence decipher your messages about what you're saying. So, if you speak in English, that's probably going to be easily deciphered and therefore reasonably pointless. Unless you have some Native Americans who can still speak their native language, like the Navajos, for example. Many different Navajo servicemen served in communication lines so as to relay messages from one point to another, and they did so in their Navajo language. That sort of code would be known as they would be known as wind talkers. Wind talkers would decipher messages, relay them in their Navajo language, and be able to help their cause. Japanese may be able to decipher an English message, but they had no idea what this Navajo language was. Pretty ingenious, and it's a wonderful contribution to our war effort as part of the Navajo tribe in particular. But you have 25,000 different Native Americans valiantly serve our country.